Hello and welcome to the Max Revenue Show. I am your host, Trey Shields, along with the Zen Master of Commercial Insurance, Micah Solis. Micah, how are you?
What's going on? I'm pretty good. How are you, man?
Another day. I saw yesterday or the other day on LinkedIn, you put up something about how you saved some cat like 100 and something grand, even though he had a pretty rough patch of losses over the last couple of years. And so, we were talking about it, and I think we wanted to do things a little bit different this week. You and I talk a lot about how to get in the door with the insured, how to sell, how to close, all that stuff, but we don't do a great job of talking about the other half of the battle, and that's selling risk to underwriters. And so I thought it'd be good to piggyback off your recent win, saving this cat a bunch of money, and just kind of want to pick your brain on how you did it, what your thoughts are on, you know, selling risk in general, but also, when it comes to these hairy ones that have got some losses or, these little bastard childs that are really tough to place. What are your thoughts on it? How do you go about doing this? That's pretty unreal that you saved some guy 100 and what 30K.
It was
You drop. Go ahead. I'll let
170,
you know.
about 177, actually, to be exact.
All right. So why don't you just recap the story and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so it's a contractor. Met with them, got hired essentially back in via AOR in I think February, March, and they come up for renewal mid-May, and basically the during my pitch of getting hired, it was one of the couple. They had a couple problems, right? First of all, their claims were absolutely terrible, but they also had an agent who was way out of his wheelhouse, right? Just really didn't know construction. I think he's more of like a life agent, possibly, right? So, anyways, I think that was part of the problem. But then more, I think the bigger problem was just all these claims they had. So, anyways, they got the concept of hiring one agent, which I would say first and foremost, I think like if you know if you're listening to this, obviously you're probably a producer, so you got to be able to convey the message to your clients that using one agent is going to get them the best deal, right? That's more times than not, right? And you got to be able to tell that story first of all. And these guys bought into that, especially if you have problems and it's a limited market. You don't want to be trying to go with two, three different agents out there, and that could be our client's first just intuition to do that. And you got to be able to push back on that in an intelligent manner and explain that. We have videos on our YouTube channel that get into kind of why that is. So I don't want to necessarily take this podcast to do that, but um, so anyways, they hire me. When I got hired, I basically told them, I said, "Hey, this is a three. Let's look 3 years out because your losses are so bad that I don't want to make any promises this year." But I said, I think there's some opportunity to potentially save. Because I said this policy here, and it was basically their equipment policy. I said looks a little overpriced. So I think there is some fat there, but I can't speak to the auto, the general liability, just because I don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of a hard market. Your claims have been awful. But I said the positive stuff you got going for you is that this past year has been clean, right? So now the 2, 3 previous years before that, we're talking millions of dollars in claims, right? Now, but it was a combo of things, right? They had one huge claim that paid out at like probably 6 million, right? Um,
What? It went
it,
into their
yeah, it went all the
excess?
way through their excess. Yep. Yeah. And then they had another crazy, so they had that claim, and then they had one other claim that was about 500,000 or 400, somewhere in that range, just to say 350, 400. And then a bunch of claims that were like 50 to 75, not a bunch, but like five, six others. Anyways, so they had a claims problem, but it all hit them in like a 3 year stretch. Well, the positive is that the multi-million dollar claim, we had video footage on it, right? We also had a police report that showed that it literally was not their fault. It was like a speeding driver, and so that we had going for us. We also had a good explanation on one of the other claims. Now, this kind of gets to my first point. First of all, when you're get into this situation, before you even sell the underwriter, you got to talk with the client, right? And you really got to coach them and look at yourself as like a kind of a sports agent, right? Like before the draft, right? You're going to tell your star college kid, hey, don't get drunk, say this, don't do stupid things. This is what you should wear. This is how you should look. This is how you should talk. Just make yourself as marketable as possible, right? Because this is a big opportunity. It's the draft. You only get this opportunity once. And so first of all, you want to put that mindset on as the agent. And so that's kind of what we did. So after I got hired, you obviously build up the submission, right? But on a hairy deal like this, you really got to do it more thoroughly than you probably normally would. So we went through all their claims, right, and built out specific. Hey, here's actually what happened. We didn't make excuses. We took ownership, but we said this is what happened, and then here's the corrective actions that we implemented to make sure it never happens again. Or here's what we're doing going forward. I made a comment, I think, in the post, like your claims history, underwriters use it because that's all they really have. But ultimately, it's a lag indicator, right? It's a looking in the past. We got to try to get underwriters as the agent to look in the future and the present and the future going forward for our clients. Like, hey, this can be a profitable account. Here's why. And so, okay, so we go through the loss runs. We get all of the details on them, right? I write an extremely detailed narrative. Probably was like 2 pages long, and then um, send it out to the underwriters. We kind of prep the underwriters first with phone calls as well. And I got to tell you, like we sent it, of course, to most underwriters. We knew we'd get a ton of declines right off the bat, which we did. But this is also important to know. All it takes is one or two strong relationships, right? On a harder account, right? If you can just sell one underwriter on the belief that okay, things will change. And so we kind of knew we had like one, or I'd say we had two that we thought could be some opportunities, right? If they could get over that just initial shock of seeing the claims be through the roof. And so that's why we prepped them with a phone call as we sent the submission. But the whole submission, the whole narrative was about the claims. It was just like, hey, just I laid it out. I was like, here's the good, but here's the bad, here's the ugly. Let's address the elephant in the room. Like, but if you can get past that, here's why I think it's a good risk. So that was the first part. Just kind of, I would say, is work with the client first of all, get a detailed narrative going, get details on the losses, get details on corrective actions, and then when you do submit it strategically, but be very communicative with the underwriters that you're going to. And then the third component, I would say, is uh, we had a loss control visit set up with the carrier that we thought was our really we had really two carriers, right? Besides the ENS or other markets that like just renewing where it was, and the one that we really felt good about, like that's where we were kind of all in on, focused on just you know giving them what they wanted to see. And they had a loss control visit set up, and before that, I jumped on a call with the client and coached them. And I normally would try to go like on something like this, I probably would have tried to go to it. I don't think it's vital as an agent that we do go to it, but at least have a prep call with your clients. So like I jumped on a call with them and said, hey, here's what's going to happen. They're going to ask about this. Here's again here's what you got to say. You don't lie, but you got to come across as very coachable, and you guys are doing the right things, but they need to know that, and they need to also, this client had the tendency of saying, well, this claim really wasn't our fault and this claim wasn't our fault, and I just had to tell him, I was like, dude, I don't care if you don't think it was your fault, take the ownership. Right? Like that was like we learned from it, here's what happened. But if you come across as like, well, this wasn't our fault, and you start saying that 2 3 4 times about every claim you had, they're gonna get the sense like, okay, like they just aren't taking ownership. Because even though claims are a lag indicator, when you have a repetitive history of them, it speaks for itself, right? Maybe none of them were your fault, but when you got 4 or 5 claims and adding up, eventually people are gonna be like, I don't care if it was your fault or not, I'm not going to insure you because something's going on. So I think that was a really important part of this all, was kind of the pre-risk control visit coaching call. And then on their part, the owners met with the risk consultant. They didn't pass them off, and they took them out to a job site, spent like 2 3 hours with them, right? So really invested that time,
Do you
and
mind
that was
telling us what
key.
kind of contractor they were?
uh, I'll just say a civil. I don't want to, because people that listen to
That's
this I
fine.
know live in my market, and I don't want to you know
Okay, got it.
yeah.
That's fine.
And so anyways, one of the other benefits, So one of our strategies also was to get this consolidated with one carrier, right? So actually, I'm rambling on too much, but let me just stop and then talk about that in a second. Let me close the loop of the risk consultant visit. So the risk consultant goes out there, visits, has a great visit. It goes really well. And that was the last thing that we needed. The underwriter's like, hey, I got this rated up. And we heard that. I was like, wow, okay, the underwriter's actually going to offer us a quote on this thing. It's amazing because we thought it'd be just a decline potentially. And like I said, we had our one option. Well, then that risk consultant goes out there, gives it the A+ rating, only had one wreck, said they were awesome. And so then we got the pricing and it was, like I said, very competitive. So one of the other key parts of this was the program was just spread out over the place, right? I mean, their auto was really the only line that was terrible. Okay. You take out the auto, it's a very profitable account. Work comp, amazing. GL, awesome. And so that's part of what I used in my narrative as well. My pitch to the underwriter, I was like, yes, the auto's been bad, but if you actually, and then you take out that one shock loss, yes, they still had, 700,000, 800,000 in claims, but if you're getting X amount of dollars, it can still be a profitable account for you, you know? And so I think it was just, there took some just thinking through of how to make it sound like a profitable opportunity for the underwriter as well in a long-term partnership. Because I was like, well, they're paying X. So if you guys can just come in here, you're still getting more than the normal market value because of their losses, right? On just their auto. So that was part of it too. It's like you can still get more than normal, and then combine all the lines, you have a good opportunity. So that's in a nutshell what all happened. But it was a cool, yeah, just a good all around success story. And I genuinely believe the carrier, is not getting themselves into something like crazy where they're going to just blow up their loss ratio. I hope that does. I genuinely believe the client has done the right things, and I believe that one crazy loss. I saw the video footage; it was awful, right? Of the deaths, and so that's kind of the story. And so, you know, that's the takeaways. I mean, you got to be able to sell your clients or to the underwriters. That's the job. That's part of your job. And I didn't do this all myself. We have a marketing team, so they helped. But I was definitely involved, and I recommend being involved as an agent. I know sometimes, depending at your agency, they want you to pass everything off, delegate it. I think there's a lot of value of at least being involved. Not saying you got to take charge of the whole process. Use your marketing team for that. It helps take it off your plate and leverage those relationships they've built, but be involved as well. Like tell your marketing team, like, hey, can I jump on a call with the underwriter? Can I, you know, explain my narrative, whatever. That can be super helpful.
You ever get a client or prospect on the phone with the underwriter?
We have in the past on certain deals. I mean, it has to be the right size or whatever. But I think some days, like this underwriter specifically, just was like, "Hey, I just want the law. I need the risk control to get out there and talk with this person and basically spend that 2-3 hours." And from her perspective, it's probably like, "Well, I don't really need to talk to them because the risk consultant and now you, who's kind of a representative of the client, I trust, right?" So, but yeah, that can be helpful too.
I had a similar situation this week, except it went the opposite way.
Ouch.
I had not that I lost. I'm not the agent that lost the business. I didn't mean like that. I have this account that it's got a little bit of hair on it, and it's in a tough class of business. There's only 3 options for them: a good, bad, and worst case, option. And I had to put them with the worst case option, because I couldn't get anybody to bite off on it. I
Yeah.
literally, I mapped everything out for them, and had multiple conversations with the underwriter, and I even told them, like, hey, they're here. I straight up just told them, I was like, hey, because the premium they're paying is so out of whack. I didn't mind sharing numbers. I was like, hey, they're at 150. They're
Mm-hmm.
profitable all the way back to this point. Even if you'll just meet me like 3/4 of the way, you can still get a ton of meat on the bone. You can go get a lot of rate, and he wouldn't budge at all. Um, and so, I
Yeah.
know that's kind
I,
of counterproductive
no.
to what the selling risk, but I guess what I'm making the point is like, even some, like, depending on the class of business and whatever, like, this isn't foolproof. It's not like,
Yeah,
you
I
know
don't
what I
want it to
mean?
come across. Yeah, and I hope. Yeah, I know in marketing titles and headlines, you got to kind of come across that way to catch eyeballs. But yeah, if you're listening to this, don't take away like, oh my gosh, Mike is claiming he has some secret magic bullet. However, in my heart of hearts, I believe if they would not have changed agents and stayed with the current guy, nothing would have changed, right? Because the guy just didn't. I just know that for sure, right? Based on conversations with the client and um, how the program was structured already. So, um,
There's
So, so just to kind of recap and tell me if I'm missing anything here. You BOR this client, and now you have taken it over, and you're immediately, and this was part, I assume this is part of your presentation, was like, hey, here's our strategy moving forward. Okay, so you, number one, setting out, or at least selling the story to the insured. This is what we're going to do to try to put lipstick on this pig. Okay,
yep,
so selling them on it. Then you went into detective mode, investigative mode, and start going through all of the claims, loss runs, getting a detailed story on each of them, getting the video footage, going and basically building your case that you're going to sell to the underwriter. Then you got on the phone with the underwriters and had conversations with them. The ones that were interested, you then, I assume it's just some third party risk consultant, come out and do it. And I get, the one thing that's interesting to me was you didn't skip the narrative part, and I think that's something that I fall into the trap of. Is I'll have a conversation with the underwriter, and we'll get all the accords and supplementals and all that, and it goes through our AMS or goes through Indio to the underwriter. But I don't, if I'm being honest, I don't send a narrative all the time, and I think I should, no matter whatever, because as I'm talking it through, how many submissions are these underwriters being inundated with? Tons. And so, like,
yep,
if I can tee it up, even though we talked about it yesterday, when we send it out, I should also send a narrative to the underwriter directly from me that's like, hey, here's what's going on. We talked about this on X date. Here's a recap, and then boom, 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 sell it in a narrative. Do you think
yeah,
I'm
no,
missing the boat there by not sending a narrative anyways, even though I've had multiple conversations with the underwriter?
yeah, absolutely. Mainly because underwriters are risk averse people, and so like even if you talk with them, think about from their perspective, and then say they look at the file, they need to be able to justify why they wrote that account if their boss pulls the file, because they might get like even if there's been no claims, even I don't know 6 months down the road, I don't know what their boss does. They look at their accounts they've written and they're like, hey, why did you write this one? It's like, oh well, this is why. They can use that narrative as evidence, but also to re-trigger their mind and refresh themselves on like, oh yeah, this is why they're doing this and this now. I thought it's worth it. So yeah, and I'm guilty too of I don't do it. I don't. Here's the deal: some narratives are short, and some are long, right? Some are, hey, this count's really clean. Here's what they do. Boom, 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 and it's like a paragraph, to two paragraphs. But this one, like I said, this was the longest narrative I've written in a long time. It was probably for sure a page. I want to say like a page and a half, but I felt like I had to because I had to. I had to get into the details on these claims, and I also had to try to paint a picture of why this account could be profitable uh, long term. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, always learning. Definitely need to get better. 100%. What else is going on in your world?
man. What else is going on? Just yeah, trying to sell other underwriters on other accounts coming up. I'm working on over the summer. Got some June deals, got an August deal. A frustrating one a good one I met with yesterday, kind of a referral story, which was kind of cool. I think I told you about this. This speaks to it makes me think, hey, referrals are undefeated when it comes to prospecting, right? Like we love cold calling here, but if you can get a referral, it bar none, that's the way to go. And case in point, yesterday, I get an email out of the blue randomly like 2 weeks ago. Guy's like, hey, been with our agent for 20 years. Think it's time to look. We'd like to get quotes. Can you meet? Like, sure. So I go out there in person yesterday. Great meeting. But I had to ask, I was like, hey, how'd you get my name? Because he was like, hey, I got your name in the email. I got your name from a guy on my network. He's like, oh, from this guy, names him. And I'm like, I was like, I don't really know him. He's like, yeah. He's like, I don't know if you know him, but he knew you apparently. I'm like, okay. And I wasn't gonna like shoot myself in the foot in front. I wasn't gonna make myself look down. I was like, okay, yeah. I said, yeah, we've probably maybe met, or maybe I have someone in my network knows him. And anyways, it was so that's how the meeting starts. Then we talk for about 30 minutes. I'm just asking him a bunch of questions. He's talking about his pain points, his business, and then kind of gets to the end of that time together. I was like, before we did a tour of his facility, I was like, hey, so is there any questions like you want to ask me, or anything you want to know about like my experience? Basically, like I think because as salespeople, we're like, hey, we got to talk, or we got to say something. Because I was pretty much asking him questions the whole time, and he's like, no, I trust my professional network, and if they recommend someone to me, I trust it. And literally, that's what he said, like full stop, period. And he's like, "You want to go tour the facility?" I was like, "Sure," and that's it. So it was like, uh, I was kind of like speechless. I'm like, "This is cool." I'm not used to this because some of you guys listening are probably awesome referral getters. I'm not. I feel like the referrals I do get, I get a couple every year, but they end up being really small or not a great fit. For one reason or another. This one is on the smaller side, but it's still like a decent. I mean, I think it'll be about 12 in revenue, so I'll take it all day long. Plus, the guy is super cool, which that trumps everything for me. If it's a great client, easy to work with, I'll write a $1,000 revenue account, right? If they're easy. Um, so that was, I think, just a good lesson to all of us to get referrals, but also a good lesson to get. I think this had to come from. I'm going to attribute it to LinkedIn because I don't know how else this strange. I even looked up the guy, dude, after the meeting that he name dropped, and I was like, I'm not even connected with him on LinkedIn. I think we're a second degree connection. So maybe he's been seeing my stuff and I don't know it, but I don't do any networking events, so I haven't in like 2 years. So maybe I should start doing a little bit more, or just keep up the LinkedIn stuff and hoping that keeps materializing into opportunities.
I think your book is the long tail play. I think that's ultimately where a lot of this stuff is coming from. Somebody bought your book. They know what you do. Sure, LinkedIn, but LinkedIn also kind of funnels them to your book. I think man, planting your flag and having a book, I think that's probably the best thing you've ever done, even though you can't necessarily put a number on it. I think that's huge.
Speaking of that, before you continue, quick,
Go ahead.
this is funny. We hired a new producer here in Austin, and we're chatting yesterday. He's like, "Man, I hate to be this guy, but because I gave him some copies of the book, I was like, hey, dude, feel free to use this for drops. It's been effective." And he's like, "Yeah, so I hate to be this guy, but did you know you have a typo on the cover of your book?" I was like, "What?" And sure enough, so he gives me the spine of my book. Can you see my screen?
I can't see what it says. What does it
It's
say?
probably blurry. Though it says on the spine of the book, it says the business insurance, but C is before N, so it's Insurance Playbook.
Oh my god!
And guys, I gotta tell you, I used a professional editor. Like he looked through it twice. But this is on the dang cover, and so it got me thinking. This is actually good. I was gonna do a LinkedIn post on this at one point, kind of a funny one, but it's like we have clients that tell us they're not worried about their policy being correct, but we got, and then I Googled it. You got literally like Harry Potter, the first edition, the author's name was spelled incorrectly. Instead of J.K. Rowling, it was like J.R. Rawlings, right? So it's like professional editors make mistakes. I've read, I think a Jordan Peterson book I was reading had like a typo in it. He's on Amazon bestseller or whatever. So typos happen, but it was just funny. I thought you guys would get a kick out of that. Here, 2 years in, never saw it, and then this guy sees it yesterday. I've never even been told about it. So
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
didn't notice it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I put a post up about this on LinkedIn. I threw up a big fat goose egg in April. So I
Congrats.
am, feeling the heat.
Humble.
I don't know about you, but whenever I see that zero come up, well, technically I did put. It shows up on the sales sheet that I put $8,000
Oh, because
on the books in
you
April.
BOR'd it a month before or
No,
something?
it's It
Yeah,
actually. So, anyways, but I didn't write anything new in April, and so, dude, I just feel like my anxiety's cranked up a couple notches. You know what I mean? You go a couple of weeks or a month or two without writing a deal, and like I feel the pressure, and I actually think
Yeah.
that's a good thing because I think when you stop feeling the pressure, it's probably time to get out. Even like my boss is like super happy, but
Yeah.
I don't like that. Like I think that's a good trait to have, is to
So,
feel like never really settled. Like I
I
have,
think,
I'm in
yeah.
my new agency. I have revalidated, in 16 months, and so like nobody's breathing down my neck, but I know where I'm trying to get to, and like I really don't like that goose egg. It's like not a good feeling.
Hey, man, I was talking to a principal of a large agency, and he told me, he said, successful producers come in all shapes and sizes. Like people always ask what makes your top producers or just a successful producer. And he was like, the one thing that they have in common is a healthy dose of anxiety, or a dose of healthy anxiety, right? So it's not like you let it consume and eat you up, but it's also like it's always kind of creeping there, like. And I think I told you this yesterday when we were chatting. So we had a baby, 10 days ago now. First week I was totally fine doing my, you know, taking time off, not making calls, doing all that, just managing some emails, but just very light. Well, this week comes around and it's starting to set in, and I was saying that moms have something called mom guilt, right? I'm not a mom, so but I know a ton of responsibility there. Don't want to be a mom. I think I probably do the hardest job in America, but there's also something that no one talks about. I think, which to me is like, I don't want to say dad guilt, but it's almost like we're both kind of talking about it right now. It's like that underlying sense of like, hey, I got to provide for my family, right? Like there's something in us that, and then so like when I'm sitting at home right now this week, spending time with my family, I'm still thinking like, okay, if I'm not out there growing my business, that's at risk, right? And so it's not a guilt, it's more of a, yeah, like an anxiety feeling. So maybe we can call it dad anxiety. But
Mm.
uh it's definitely there. It's definitely real. It's not like it's consuming me like, oh my God, I can't, but it's just that underlying, like you said, it's like I gotta be doing something, but you know, um anyways, it's so I'm kind of working through that myself, even though, I've had a good year. It's still like, all right, you know,
A good year. You've had a fucking huge year.
it's all relative. It's relative. I
Oh,
mean,
no. Yeah, you're killing it. So every the first of every month, I go into Max Revenue HQ and I put up a post that's like, "Hey, share your previous month's wins." And so I'm, in order to get the conversation started, I'm always like, "Hey, I did this," not as bragging, but just to like get the momentum going on the post.
yep.
And so I did it. I went in and said, "Hey, I put up a big goose egg. It's tough out here for everybody." And then I start, boom, comments start hitting. I start reading it, and I'm like, some of these cats are writing like 2, 3, 4 deals in a month, and I'm like, it was gasoline on the fire. And there's a couple of these guys in there that are really killers. Shout out to James. No, last name starts with an N. There's a bunch of other guys in there that are doing a lot of business, and these cats are writing. They're like, dude, every month they show up 2, 3 deals, 2, 3 deals, 5K, 8K, 12K, 25K, and we've got some killers in there. So that is a shameless plug for the Max Revenue HQ. You kind of fall to the level of those that you're around. So, if you do happen to be in an agency where there's maybe not a lot of accountability back and forth, or maybe you're just not seeing a lot of guys who are really growing, highly recommend getting into Max Revenue HQ. You can only get in there, by the way, by being an email subscriber. So you have to subscribe to the Max Revenue letter, and then once you do that, you'll see on Sunday's email there will be a link to get into HQ. But highly recommend that if you want to get around a group of people who are doing what you want to do. By all means, go get in the middle of the ship. So I did have last thing. I did have a referral, and I thought there was one little lesson worth sharing. I get this call out of the blue. I'm doing the leg thing, by the way. I got it's just more comfortable.
For those listening, not watching, go check out the YouTube channel. Shameless plug. If you want to see us, our ugly mugs banter back and forth, but Max is in a pose that is a little bit provocative.
Yes,
for some of the listeners
it's just
out there.
It's comfortable to sit like this. So I get this call out of the blue, and this guy says, "Hey, I got your number from XYZ. You come highly recommended. I'd like for you to work on our insurance." I said, "Okay, what's the deal? Get the story." He's this guy. It's a startup contractor. My initial thought is like, son of a bitch. Last thing I need, some new venture,
Yeah.
In my head, I'm like, I really don't want to do this. Well, it turns out I was actually presenting renewal to XYZ yesterday. And so I asked him about it. I said, "Hey, so-and-so called me the other day." And he goes, "Yeah, I sent him your way. You want to write that?" I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, he used to work for so-and-so, and he was their, head, whatever, basically the number 2 guy." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I'm to fill it all in. He was the number 2 guy at probably the biggest contractor in this space in our state. He's now jumping ship to go start his own thing.
Yeah.
So,
Those are the best ones.
It's going to be small to start with, but as they grow, it'll be a great one to get from the start. So, maybe do a little more investigative work than just what you see. This a lot of times it's worth it to invest in, kind of like your guy you were talking about, like you just like him as a person, and so you'll write it. So even though this is a new venture, it's well below minimum premium of what I like to write. I'm not going to just be dogmatic about it. You can see that this is going to be what we talk about. It's a 3-star recruit with 5-star potential. So it's worth it.
We got to trademark that phrase, by the way, because that's such a good one. Not to toot our own horn, but that's a good one.
I've designed Max Revenue coffee mugs. And we'll eventually that we give them out as part of like referral swag if you refer anybody to the newsletter. And so I've been thinking about what are these little quips, like what are these little, zingers that I want to put on the coffee mug. So on one side, it's like the Max Revenue eye patch guy. And then on the other side, I want to put one of those zingers on there. So like be bold or get rolled. I don't know, maybe
don't
that's
take
one
advice
too. Like,
from people who inherited their book from daddy. I mean,
that's also one. Look for 3-star recruits with 5-star potential. I don't know. I gotta come up with 4 or 5 of these little things. Put on these mugs.
That's awesome.
Just a little reminder while you're getting your morning caffeine kick. What to do? Oh, IDGAF. That's got to be on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also, who needs help today?
I like that. That's a good one for the grandmas out there. All the people who want the clean versions.
Yes. Anything else you got before we wrap this thing up?
No, I think we hit the nail on the head there. So, I got nothing else other than, go out there and shoot. We're already into May. So the year's halfway. For me, my year starts 11/1, but for a lot of you guys, it's 1/1. So Like literally, you should be
Golly.
prospecting. You should be prospecting right now for almost fourth quarter, like late, like mid third quarter into almost early fourth quarter if it's bigger size prospects. So if you want to, that's just a reminder. Don't be targeting July. If it's May, don't be calling late Junes, Julys, even early August at this point. You should be late August, September, October. Like that's where you got to be focused. So
Oh,
that's all I got.
You just made my anxiety ratchet up a couple notches.
I should asterisk.
Oh man.
Depends on the industry. You know, you are in towing a lot and stuff like that, so that's a little bit different. But I'm just saying, if you're in this
Yeah, but
traditional,
still, most everything I work is 90 days out, right? So even if you push forward 90 days, we're still looking at into Q3, Q4. I mean, and there's only so many that renew in that time frame. So, and I am well behind on my revenue goal for the year. I say well behind. I'm pretty much on pace, but you know what I mean. I don't feel comfortable. It's like, okay, so let me just run this by you real quick. You know, let's say my goal is 100, 200, whatever, it's arbitrary. Even if you're on pace, right? So let's say we just got through Q1, we're now kind of a month into Q2. Even when I am on pace, okay, so let's say I'm at 30K in revenue and I'm trying to get to 100. The way I look at it is I've still got to create 60,000. Like, I don't know where it's coming from. And that's like kind of the scary part of this industry. And this is why I don't know how people can sleep at night if they're not consistently prospecting, because it's like, it's got to come from somewhere. Where do you think it's going to come from? I'm prospecting every day. You're prospecting every day. And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at where am I going to find $60,000, and I can't see it right now, and that scares the shit out of me. But it's like, it's why you just got to keep hammering.
And if you saw, I put up a post last week on LinkedIn, and it was like, dude,
or
I've lost
70,000. Sorry, my math's off.
No, it's fine. I lost 30,000, almost 40,000 in revenue without losing an account just last month. Now I actually ended up on a net positive for the month because I wrote some stuff, but but still, I always look at, okay, if I wouldn't have lost that, I'd be here, but now I'm only here, right? So it's like really frustrating. And it was nothing I could control on all three deals, right? They're all current clients still. We didn't lose anybody. It's just the way that it shook out. And so that was just another affirmation of, like, dude, you got to be prospecting all the time. Like, even like, I think I used to think about, we think about getting to that $1 million book or $2 million book or 1.5 or 800,000, whatever that number is for you guys. I used to think about that when I got in the industry. It's like, man, if I could just get there, I'll be happy. I'll be content. I'll be good. And I don't think that's really the case. The older I get, I realize, you got to be prospecting all the time. Sure, some of that pressure's off, especially if you have a diverse group of clients and it's not made up of just a couple. But that also made me think of one of I don't know if it was, I was listening to this pastor actually give a talk. His name was Tim Keller, but he was talking about the story from the New York Times where this lady wrote a column, and she was saying she saw a bunch of people in New York City try to say, hey, if I could just make it big, right? If I get my big break, I'll be happy. And what she ended up learning is that all these bouncers, these bartenders, whatever, that were trying to make it, they'd always make it, and then they'd be like, nothing changed, right? Like after they hit that goal, nothing really changed internally to the same person. And so it's also a good reminder on that side of it's like, hey, whatever you're shooting for, when you achieve that, your life's not going to be any ultimately different. I mean, personally, right? You might be able to buy more materialistic things and all that, but ultimately, if you look internally, it's like if you're unhappy, you're still going to be unhappy, right? If you're miserable, if you're an angry person, if you have no friends or, terrible family life, all that stuff is still going to be there. So as you're trying to get to these goals, and as we have this anxiety or this itch, let that anchor you too. Like, hey, man, enjoy the process, and it is what it is. So
I read this quote this morning in one of the newsletters I subscribe to, and so I put it up on LinkedIn. You've heard of Og Mandino, the guy that wrote The Greatest Salesman in the World?
Yes.
Okay, so he has this quote on work. You were not created for a life of idleness. You cannot eat from sunrise to sunset or drink or play or have sex. Work is not your enemy, but your friend. if all manners of labor were forbidden to thee, you would fall to your knees and beg an early death.
Yeah.
So it's like
That's
I'm not a fan of like the hustle culture and all that, but like we were made to work. I don't think there's any arriving, like what you're talking about. When we get to $1 million book, I don't think it's all of a sudden, you're just gonna like feel this weight off your shoulders. And I don't think you and I don't think you should. It's like fulfillment is just in the work itself, just doing the daily practice of doing, the one thing.
correct.
So
Yeah. No, I think in our cult, actually, I've noticed everything in life, right? I guess it's always like there's two extremes, right? It's like we have left, right, conservative, liberal, whatever, any situation you look at, but especially with this, you have the hustle culture, then you have the lazy culture, right? And then you got the people who follow down the center where you should be, which is like, hey, it's a good thing, but don't let it consume you. And that's not really I wouldn't say your identity, but yeah, that's a good
all right,
quote.
cool. Well, yep. Enough of the getting deep stuff. All right, let's sign off. Guys, hope you have a great week. And if you're not already a subscriber to the Max Revenue Letter, what the hell are you doing? Check the show notes. Go subscribe. We'll send you a newsletter every Sunday, and we might even sling you one on Wednesdays too. Feeling how froggy I'm feeling. So go do that. Have a great week, and we will catch you next Monday.
Adios.
Adios.